Hey guys, welcome back. I've named the channel, so it's ASMRadventures with Andy. Um, I'm gonna be continuing with Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. As you can tell, I got a new camera, and so yeah, that's exciting. I've been meaning to get a new camera for a while, so I'm not using my tablet for everything. So let's continue. We're still on chapter 1 of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. We left off on Mr. Dursley going to sleep. Mr. Dursley might have been drifting into an uneasy sleep, but the cat on the wall outside was showing no signs of sleepiness. It was sitting as still as a statue, its eyes fixed unblinkingly on the far corner of Privet Drive. It didn't so much as quiver when a car door slammed on the next street, nor when two owls swooped overhead. In fact, it was midnight before the cat moved at all. A man appeared on the corner as the cat had been watching. It appeared so suddenly and silently, you'd have thought he had just popped out of the ground. The cat's tail twitched and its eyes narrowed. Nothing like this man had ever been seen on Privet Drive. He was tall, thin, and very old, judging by the silver of his hair and beard, which were both long enough to tuck it right into his belt. He was wearing long robes, a purple cloak that swept on the ground, and high-heeled buckled boots. His blue eyes were light and bright, and sparkled behind half-moon spectacles, and his nose was very, very long and crooked, as though it had been broken at least twice. This man's name was Albus Dumbledore. Albus Dumbledore didn't seem to realize he had just arrived in a street where everything from his name to his boots was unwelcome. He was busy rummaging in his cloak, looking for something, but he did seem to realize he was being watched, because he looked up suddenly at the cat, which was still staring at him from the other end of the street. For some reason, the sight of the cat seemed to amuse him. He chuckled and muttered, "I should have known." He found what he was looking for inside his pocket. It seemed to be a silver cigarette lighter. He flicked it open, held it up in the air, and clicked it. The nearest street lamp went out with a little pop. He clicked it again. The next lamp flicked. I can't speak sometimes. He clicked it again. The next lamp flickered into darkness. 12 times he clicked the putter-outer, until the only lights left on the whole street were two tiny print picks in the distance, which were the eyes of the cat watching him. If anyone looked out their window now, even beady-eyed Mrs. Dursley, they wouldn't be able to see anything that was happening down on the pavement. Dumbledore slipped the putter-outer back inside his cloak and set off down the street towards number 4, where he sat down on the wall next to the cat. He didn't look at it, but after a moment he spoke to it. "Fancy seeing you here, Professor McGonagall." He turned to smile at the tabby, but it had gone. Instead, he was smiling at a rather severe-looking woman who was wearing square glasses exactly the shape of the markings the cat had around its eyes. She, too, was wearing a cloak, an emerald one. Her black hair was drawn into a tight bun shaped distinctly ruffled. "How did you know it was me?" she asked. "My dear Professor, I have never seen a cat sit so stiffly." "You'd be stiff too if you'd been sitting on a brick wall all day. said Professor McGonagall. All day. When you could have been celebrating. I must have passed a dozen feasts and parties on my way here. Professor McGonagall sniffed angrily. Oh, yes. Everyone's celebrating all right, she said impatiently. You'd think they'd be a bit more careful, but no. Even Muggles have noticed something going on. It was on their news. She jerked her head back to the Dursleys' living room window. I heard it. Flocks of owls, shooting stars. Well, they're not completely stupid. They're bound to notice something. Shooting stars down in Kent. I bet that was Daedalus Diggle. He'd never had much sense. You can't blame them, said Dumbledore gently. We've had precious little to celebrate for 11 years. I know that, said Professor McGonagall irritably. But that's no reason to lose our heads. People are being downright careless. Out on the streets in broad daylight, not even dressed in Muggle clothes, swapping rumors. She threw a sharp, sideways glance at Dumbledore here, as though hoping he was going to tell her something. But he didn't, so she went on. A fine thing it would be if on the very day you-know-who seemed to have disappeared at last, the Muggles found out about all of us. I suppose he really has gone, Dumbledore? It certainly seems so, said Dumbledore. We have much to be thankful for. Would you care for a lemon drop? A what? A lemon drop. They're a kind of Muggle sweet I'm rather fond of. No, thank you, said Professor McGonagall coldly, as though she didn't think this was the moment for lemon drops. As I say, even if you know who has gone. My Professor McGonagall, my dear Professor, surely a sensible person like yourself can call him by his name. All this you-know-who nonsense. For 11 years I've been trying to persuade everyone to call him by his proper name. Voldemort. Professor McGonagall flinched, but Dumbledore, who was unsticking 2 lemon drops, seemed not to notice. It gets all so confusing if we keep saying you-know-who. I've never seen any reason to be frightened by saying Voldemort's name. I know you haven't, said Professor McGonagall, sounding half exasperated, half admiring. But you're different. Everyone knows you're the only one you know. All right, Voldemort was frightened of. You flatter me, said Professor Dumbledore calmly. Voldemort had powers I never had. Only because you're too, well, noble to use them. It's lucky it's dark. I haven't blushed like this since Madame Pomfrey told me she liked my new earmuffs. Professor McGonagall shot a sharp look at Dumbledore and said, The owls are nothing next to the rumors that are flying around. You know what everyone's saying? About why he disappeared? What finally stopped him? It seems Professor McGonagall had reached the point of she was most anxious to discuss. The real reason she'd been waiting on a cold, hard wall all day. For neither as a cat nor as a woman had she fixed Dumbledore with such a piercing stare as she did now. It was plain to whatever everyone was saying, she was not going to believe it until Dumbledore told her it was true. Dumbledore, however, was choosing another lemon drop and did not answer. What they're saying, she pressed on, is that last night Voldemort turned up in Godric Hollow. She went to find the Potters. The rumors is that Lily and James Potter are that they're dead. Dumbledore bowed his head. Professor McGonagall gasped. Lily and James? I can't believe it. I don't want to believe it. Oh, Albus. Dumbledore reached out and patted her on the shoulder. I know, he said heavily. Professor McGonagall's voice trembled as she went on. That's not all. They're saying he tried to kill the Potter's son, Harry. But he couldn't. He couldn't kill that little boy. No one knows why or how, but they're saying that when he couldn't kill Harry Potter, Voldemort's power somehow broke, and that's why he's gone. Dumbledore nodded glumly. It's true, faltered Professor McGonagall. After all he's done, all the people he's killed, he couldn't kill a little boy? It's just astounding. Of all things to stop him, but how in the name of heaven did Harry survive? We can only guess, said Professor Dumbledore. We may never know. Professor McGonagall pulled out a lace handkerchief and dabbed her eyes beneath her spectacles. Dumbledore gave a great sniff as he took a golden watch from his pocket and examined it. It was a very odd watch. It had 12 hands but no numbers. Instead, little planets were moving around the edge. It must have made some sense to Dumbledore, though, because he put it back in his pocket and said, Hagrid's late. I suppose it was he who told you I'd be here, by the way. Yes, said Professor McGonagall, and I don't suppose you're going to tell me why we're here. You're here, of all places. I've come to bring Harry to his aunt and uncle. They're the only family he has left now. You don't mean you can't mean the people who live here, cried Professor Dumbledore, jumping to her feet and pointing at number 4. Dumbledore, you can't. I've been watching them all day. You couldn't find 2 people who are less like us, and they've got this son. I saw him taking his mother all the way up the street, screaming for sweets. Harry Potter, come and live here? It's the best place for him, Dumbledore said firmly. His aunt and uncle will be able to explain everything to him when he's older. I've written them a letter. A letter, repeated Professor McGonagall faintly, sitting back down on the wall. Really, Dumbledore, you think you can explain this all in a letter? These people will never understand him. He'll be famous, a legend. I wouldn't be surprised if today was known as Harry Potter Day in the future. There will be books written about Harry. Every child in our world will know his name. Exactly. It would be enough to turn any boy's head, famous before he could walk and talk, famous for something he wouldn't even remember. Can you see how much better off he'll be growing up away from all of that until he's ready to take it? Professor McGonagall opened her mouth, changed her mind, swallowed, and then said, Yes. Yes, you're right, of course. But how is the boy getting here, Dumbledore? She eyed his cloak, and suddenly, as though she thought he might be hiding Harry underneath. Hagrid's bringing him. You think it wise to trust Hagrid with something this important? I would trust Hagrid with my life, said Dumbledore. I'm saying his heart isn't in the right place, said Professor McGonagall grudgingly, but you can't pretend he's not careless. He does tend to... What was that? A low rumbling sound had broken the silence around them. It grew steadily louder as they looked up and down the street for some sign of a headlight. It swelled to a roar as they both looked up at the sky. A huge motorcycle fell out of the air and landed on the road in front of them. If the motorcycle was huge, it was nothing to the man sitting astride it. He was almost twice as tall as a normal man, and at least 5 times as wide. He looked simply too big to be allowed, and so wild. Long tangles of bushy black hair and beard hid most of his face. He had hands the size of trash can lids, and his feet in their leather boots were like baby dolphins. In his vast muscular arms he was holding a bundle of blankets. "Hagrid," said Dumbledore, sounding relieved. "At last. And where did you get that motorcycle?" "Borrowed it, Professor Dumbledore, sir," said the giant, climbing carefully off the motorcycle as he spoke. "Young Sirius Black lent it to me. I got him, sir." "No problems, were there?" "No, sir. House was almost destroyed, but I got him out right before the Muggles started swarming around. He fell asleep as we were flying over Bristol." Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall bent forward over the bundle of blankets. Inside, just visible, was a baby boy fast asleep. Under a tuft of jet black hair over his forehead, they could see a curiously shaped cut, like a bolt of lightning. "Is that where?" whispered Professor McGonagall. "Yes," said Dumbledore. "He'll have that scar forever." "Couldn't you do something about it?" Dumbledore. "Even if I could, I wouldn't. Scars can come in handy. I have one myself, above my left knee. That is a perfect map of London Underground. Well, give him here, Hagrid. We'd better get this over with." Dumbledore took Harry in his arms and turned towards the Dursleys' house. Could I say goodbye to him, sir?" said Hagrid. He bent his great shaggy head over Harry and gave him what must have been a very scratchy, whiskery kiss. Then suddenly, Hagrid let out a howl like a wounded dog. "Shh!" hissed Professor McGonagall. "You'll wake the Muggles." "Sorry," sobbed Hagrid, just taking out a large spotted handkerchief and burying his face in it. "I can't stand it. Lily and James dead, and poor little Harry off to live with Muggles." Yes, it's all very sad, but get a grip of yourself, Hagrid, or we'll be found," Professor McGonagall whispered, patting Hagrid gingerly on the arm as Dumbledore stepped over the low garden wall and walked to the front door. He laid Harry gently on the doorstep, took a letter out of his cloak, tucked it inside Harry's blankets, and then came back to the other two. For a full minute, the 3 of them stood and looked at the little bundle. Hagrid's shoulders shook. Professor McGonagall blinked furiously, and the twinkling light that usually shone from Dumbledore's eyes seemed to have gone out. "Well," said Dumbledore finally, "that's that. We have no business staying here. We may as well go and join the celebrations." "Yeah," said Hagrid in a muffled voice. "I'll be taking Sirius's bike back. Good night, Professor McGonagall. Professor Dumbledore, sir." Wiping his streaming eyes on his jacket sleeve, Hagrid swung himself onto the motorcycle and kicked the engine into life. With a roar, it rose into the air and off into the night. "I shall see you soon, I expect, Professor McGonagall," said Dumbledore, nodding to her. Professor McGonagall blew her nose in reply. Dumbledore turned and walked back down the street. On the corner, he stopped and took out the silver prowler. He clicked it once, and 12 balls of light sped back into their street lamps so that Privet Drive glowed suddenly orange and he could make out a tabby cat slinking around the corner at the end of the street. He could just see the bundle of blankets on the step of number 4. "Good luck, Harry," he murmured. He turned on his heel, and with a swish of his cloak, he was gone. A breeze ruffled the neat hedges of Privet Drive, which lay silent and tidy under the inky sky. The very last place you would expect astonishing things to happen. Harry Potter rolled over inside his blankets without waking up. One small hand closed over the letter beside him and he slept on, not knowing he was special, not knowing he was famous, not knowing he would be woken in a few hours' time by Mrs. Dursley's scream as she opened the front doors to put out the milk bottles, nor that he would spend the next few weeks being prodded and pinched by his cousin Dudley. He couldn't know that at this very moment, people meeting in secret all over the country were holding up their glasses and saying in hushed voices, "To Harry Potter, the boy who lived." Thank you for joining me reading Harry Potter. I'll hopefully get a schedule soon. Please subscribe below. I have some plans on what I'd like to do, including a game night. I've got a few ideas for what I can do that. Tea time, I collect different flavors of tea, and I love tea. I've got a few roleplay ideas as well, and nature walks. I know a few places that would be good to visit for that. Thank you for joining me. Please comment. Critiques are always welcome. Thank you very much.